Chapter 1. How to choose old sweaters to unravel for yarn. What to look for at the thrift store. Number 1. Be wary of wool. When wool products are washed repeatedly, the fibers do something called felting. This means that a sweater that started out made up of individual threads has now become one inseparable, fused blob. While it is sometimes possible to unravel with a bit more finesse, it's best to start out with a cotton or man-made item to unravel. A felted sweater will look something like this illustration. This is a close-up view of the sort of sweater you'll probably want to avoid. Here is an example of a wool sweater made from coarse yarn that has not felted. Coarser yarns like this are often an exception to this rule of avoiding wool. As can be seen when looking at the material close up, the stitches and thread are quite a lot larger. Number 2. Make sure to check the seams. Sweaters are commonly manufactured in two ways. Sometimes companies weave large pieces of sweater fabric, cut the necessary pieces from this larger swatch of cloth, just like they would do to make clothing with other fabrics, and sew them together. This is the type you want to avoid at all costs. Because the pieces were cut from a larger section of cloth, if you unravel this type of sweater, you'll end up with a pile of short bits of string instead of one continuous strand. Not very useful. Avoid buying sweaters with seams that look like the one pictured above. This type of seam will stand up vertically if you lay both sides of the fabric flat as seen above, and lay flat if the sweater is turned inside out and laid flat. On the other hand, most manufacturers weave the front, back, and collar of a sweater out of one continuous strand and then weave those sections together. This is the type of sweater construction you will be looking for. Buy sweaters that look like the one above instead. This sort of seam will usually be much fatter, and it will be much harder to see the thread or yarn holding the two sides together. Number 3. Check them again. Sometimes they'll make it easy on you by using a slightly different type of yarn to weave the sweater pieces together. For your first project or two, you may want to look for this type of construction, since it means taking the sweater apart a bit easier. Number 4. Don't see what is. See what could be. You're bound to see your share of sweater train wrecks while you're browsing. Shopping for yarn this way requires you to look beyond the horrific, extra-large, fuzzy fuchsia monstrosity on the rack and see that when paired with that weird yellow thing across the aisle, you might just have the makings for a cheery Afghan for your little niece. Make sure to look at sweater racks for all sizes and try to revert each sweater you see back into the walls of yarn you're going to turn it into. How to tell what kind of yarn you've found. Sometimes you may find an interesting sweater that's missing a label or has one that's become too faded to read. You can still tell quite a lot about what sort of fiber it was made of, however. You'll want to make sure you know what you're working with, since different fibers will require different types of care, have varying strengths and durabilities, and be suited for different types of projects. Most of your finds will be sheep wool, cotton, synthetic, or some combination of those three. For this reason, most of the following information will focus on those types of fibers. Start by closely examining the sweater. Most often, you'll be able to figure out all you really need to know from doing so. This can include comparing the mystery yarn to yarn that does have a label. How does it compare to other wool yarns you own? Other cotton ones? The following are a few common traits that also might be helpful. If the yarn is sheep wool, strands will tend to be fuzzier looking than cotton. Plus, chances are they'll have that familiar, slightly itchy texture. If you've already purchased the yarn, You can try to break a strand as well. Wool breaks quite easily unless it is a very thick strand. If the yarn is cotton, the strands will be inelastic and relatively smooth. In addition, the sweater will not have pilled. Pills are those little annoying lint-like balls that sometimes form on older sweaters. If the yarn is synthetic. If you've already purchased, try biting a strand. Most synthetic fibers will have a horrible squeaky result. If you are still uncertain what you're working with, there are several other quick tests you can do using simple supplies that you probably already have around the house. The burn test. What you'll need: tweezers, a small snippet of the test yarn, 1 to 2 inches. A lighter is best, but matches will work in a pinch. A sink or another location that's easy to clean and is fire safe. What to do: take the snippet and hold it to the flame with the tweezers. Don't just use your fingers. It's helpful to perform this test over a sink. This makes it easy to wash away any ash that falls, and also means that if the yarn is dropped, no harm is done. In addition, make sure that you're ready to blow out the fire on the tip of the yarn sample if necessary. Number 2. Compare the results to the information below. For the first few times you do this, it can also be helpful to burn another snippet of known yarn once you think you've figured out the fiber. For example, if you think the fiber is wool, burn a snippet of something you know is wool. If the results are the same, then you are correct. If the fiber is wool or another animal fiber, mohair, angora, cashmere, and so on, it will stop burning on its own once you remove it from the flame. Wool is fire retardant. This may take a second to happen, however. It will smell very much like burnt hair. Don't know what this smells like? Hold a piece of hair to the same flame with tweezers and compare. It will form a large amount of ash at the tip. The ash will usually stay attached to the rest of the string, but will easily crumple off when pinched. Make sure to wait until the ash is cool to test this. Wait at least 10 seconds. This is a photo of sheep wool. This is a photo of a sheep wool test strand after the burn test, but before the ash has been pinched. This is what the ash will look like after you pinch the tip of the yarn gently. If the fiber is synthetic, acrylic, nylon, polyester, the sample will continue to burn when you remove it from the flame. The sample will have a chemical burnt plastic smell. A hard plastic-like substance will form at the tip instead of ash. As can be seen below, it will often look quite shiny. This is an example of synthetic yarn test sample. The melted black material at the end is hard once cooled and will not break easily. If the fiber is cotton or another plant fiber, the sample will continue to burn when you remove it from the flame. It will smell like wood smoke. Most of the fiber will simply burn away. What little remains will form a much finer, dust-like ash that falls easily from the tip. As can be seen above, there is much less ash created when cotton yarn burns. If the fiber is a synthetic wool mix, depending on the ratio of synthetic to wool contents, it may continue to burn or go out. This can help to judge what the main substance is. It will smell like a mix of burnt plastic and hair. It may also mostly melt or form ash more like that for wool fiber. Again, this can help to judge what the main substance is. If the fiber is a synthetic cotton mix, the sample will continue to burn when you remove it from the flame. It will smell like a mix of burnt plastic and wood smoke. As with synthetic wool blend, it may mostly melt. As with a synthetic wool blend, it may mostly melt or mostly form dusty ash. Use this to help figure out what the main contributor is. If you're still uncertain, or if you hope to figure out if you've got a mix of wool and synthetics, there is one additional easy test you can perform, the bleach test. What you'll need: regular household bleach, a clear jar, a snippet of the test yarn. 1 to 2 inches will work fine. What to do: pour a small amount of bleach into a clear jar, enough so that the approximately 1 to 2 inches, enough so that approximately 1 inch of liquid is there. Add the snippet to the jar. This is what your test should look like when you've just begun. Wait to see what happens. You'll need to check in approximately 1 hour, and depending on the result at that point, you may need to check a second time in 24 hours. What the results tell you: if the yarn is wool or another animal fiber, it will dissolve rapidly and completely. It should take less than an hour. If the yarn is cotton or another plant fiber, it will dissolve, but it can take quite a lot longer to do so. Allow up to 24 hours. If the yarn is synthetic, it will look pretty much the same after 24 hours. Chances are the colors won't even fade. If the yarn is partially wool and partially synthetic, some of it will be gone in an hour. This gives you a handy way to estimate what percentage is what. In other words, if about half the yarn strand is gone, then your yarn is probably about half wool, and so on. If the yarn is partially plant fiber and partially synthetic, some will be gone after 24 hours and some won't. Again, you can estimate percentages based on what's left.